For those of you just joining us, my name is Amy Lesnick. I'm your MC for the afternoon. I'm CEO of Pledge 1%, and we have another amazing lineup ahead of us. This one's called Where Do We Go From Here? Startups in 2019. So as we near the end of an incredible 2 days here at Startup University, now is a good time for us to reflect on the year we've had and to look forward. From GDPR, AI, social upheaval, 2018 has seen business shaken to its core. But what does this mean for future startups? Here to give us insight, advice, and maybe some warnings of the year ahead, we have an incredible lineup. In conversation with Eric Schurenberg, please welcome our first speaker, Nichole Mustard, co-founder and chief revenue officer at Credit Karma, Oisin, CEO of Handy, Noramay Cadena, co-founder and managing director of Make in LA, and new Pledge 1% member, Sachin Duggal, co-founder of Engineer.ai. Thank you very much.
Hello, everyone. You've now, with this panel of distinguished entrepreneurs and financiers, had the opportunity to ask the panelists what the future holds. And if you are aware of the research on how great experts are at predicting the future, you know that the only good thing about it is that we'll all be gone before you find out how wrong we really are. However, there is, from the research done by Philip Tetlock, the University of Pennsylvania psychologist who's looked into how to predict the future, the one thing you can do that has a better than average chance of being right about the future is to look into the trends that are going on now that you see have momentum and then project them into the future. So that's what I'll ask the panel to do for our first question. So for 2019, what trends do you see right now that you see having momentum and a lot of power that will shape the world of entrepreneurship in 2019? Nichole, let's start with you.
It's a softball. I think one of the big trends that you're starting to see is really around big data and how data is being utilized to personalize everything for consumers. If that's the route you take to your house, if that's self-driving cars, if that's the offers that help with your finances, data is behind all of that. It's enabled by the beautiful technology of Python. But the more data that's available to businesses, the more personalized experience you'll have. And I think we all love personalized experiences, so I'd love to see more of that.
OK, 2019 means more data. Noramay, what do you see at Make It in LA?
So 2019 for me is about access to capital. We've seen all the diversity reports around the amount of venture funding going to female founders, founders of color. And so what I'm seeing in Los Angeles and actually across the nation is an increased number of micro funds that are either led by women or people of color or investing directly into these groups. And I think that this access to capital is going to be transformational in terms of the type of startups we see emerge.
OK, good. Well, that would certainly be a trend we'd love to see. Oisin, projecting the trends you see now out into the next year, what do you see?
I think you're seeing more and more people try to tackle the big, messy, old school businesses and break them into parts that are actually manageable. So you think about these businesses that are industries like legal profession, which haven't been revolutionized at all, or you think about, whether it's home services, or you think about all these like really old businesses. And I think more and more you're seeing people slim down parts of them and saying, hey, you know what? We can't solve the whole industry. We can't take a tech front and put it on the front of a massive law firm. What we can do is we can take a sliver of it, or we can take a sliver of home services, and we can actually go really deep and build compelling businesses by shrinking the problem space. And I think that's a trend we're going to see more and more of.
Yeah, interesting. Oisin, can you think of a company that's kind of a model of that trend?
I mean, you can think about what Atrium is doing in law. You can think of, even go with another legal example. Think about what Carta or eShares are doing. You've got this huge problem of company ownership, and they've said, hey, you know what? Let's take a very specific part of it. Let's take the cap table and let's solve it. Let's just solve the cap table. I'm sure they have a much bigger vision. And I think historically, entrepreneurs have never had a problem of picking a big enough vision. What they've got a challenge with is making it accessible enough to actually solve part of the problem, to get momentum and get traction in the business.
Okay, good. Sachin, it's your turn. So looking at the trends that are affecting your business or that you observe around you, what do you see as one of the markers for 2019?
So I guess we see it from two perspectives. One is, typically up till now, we've seen small business be in traditional economy, and then new business be in digital economy. And they've always sort of kept separate. We're now seeing every small, medium business think there is no difference and they want to build tech. And so that's really interesting because just from a volume perspective, last year, $500 billion was spent by small, medium companies building bespoke software. We think that's a $10 trillion market over the next 7 years. So the amount of pure technology that's going to get built is exponentially more. And sort of the contra side to that is to be able to deliver that much technology, you're going to see a new marriage between man and machine, or human and machine, where previously machines were doing sort of periphery automation, some suggestion, and you're going to see machines stepping in further, whether AI or not, to be able to take care of the highly repetitive pieces so that the human value moves further up the stack.
Good, all right. So that's an interesting kind of variety, a tapestry of different trends based around technology advancements and depth of data, but also cultural changes in financing and business focus. I'd like to focus for this next prediction about the culture of entrepreneurship and the pool of people that take the leap and start companies and succeed or fail. In just the most past few years, all of us have seen a narrowing of the inflow of entrepreneurs who were born abroad, an opportunity for them, resistance to people who are first generation. That group of people, as we all know, disproportionately go on to form companies. And I'm talking about in the US. Do you see that as a problem? Do you see that reversing? And will it finally have an effect on the rate of business formation in the US? Noramay, could I ask you to take that question first?
Yeah. So thinking about some of the founders in our portfolio, and we run a pretty small fund investing in early stage hardware, over 50% of our CEOs are immigrants. And related to the last point I brought up, over half of the companies include a female founder. So we've seen applicants into our accelerator program from 68 different countries in the last 3 years. That number increases every time we open up the application period. So do I see a problem? No. I think we are making more of an effort to actually increase in different regions around the world. And investing in quite a few immigrant founders.
Good, good. Sachin, want to tackle it?
So I think you see it from a couple of points. So just a couple of data points. So last year, the Global Entrepreneurship Monitor said somewhere between 150 and 175 million new businesses were created. I think when we talk about entrepreneurship, we run the risk of becoming very focused on tech entrepreneurs or technology-oriented entrepreneurs. But there are already well over 150 million new companies being set up every year. There's another 30, 40 million of them that are reinventing themselves. They're going through some sort of transformation. And so when you see the number of tech companies versus total entrepreneurship, it's still a very small percentage. But today, the difference is you can no longer not be a tech company. And so you're seeing that shift not only from where they are in the world, you're seeing the shift of their educational background. Business for them is about making money and cash. Business for tech is about growth and acceleration. And so you're going to see this really interesting mix of culture, especially as they start competing in the same technology landscape as those that are, in Silicon Valley or somewhere else.
Yeah,
Good.
I think you take home service as a platform or as an industry, and you've got this huge business, this huge $400 billion market, where the vast majority of it is not online. 90% plus of it is not online. And yet you've got more and more people engaging in platforms like Handy, like HomeAdvisor and others that are actually leveraging the fact that they have slightly more slightly more of a tech leaning than the average person in the home services industry, and they're building really sizable businesses very quickly by leveraging technology and leveraging the marketing reach of businesses like Angie's and Home Advisor.
Huh, that's interesting. Let me move the, well, Nichole, also I meant to include you on that too.
Just a quick addition. I think there's, when we started over 11 years ago, you had to go to Sand Hill, and there was a limited group of VCs, and they were looking for certain trends, and they sort of had a bias of, putting money in things that they had seen be successful before. I think nowadays you're seeing many different types of venture capital funds raised, some that are specifically for women, some that are specifically for immigrants and different types of opportunities. And I think that's actually making access more widely available as well.
Okay, good. Yeah, more access is better, and the rates of funding, capitalization for underrepresented groups of people is kind of an embarrassment for the entire tech industry. One of the kind of another cultural element that feeds into the stories of you, Nichole, in particular, and you, Noramay, is the rags to riches kind of story, which is so inspiring to entrepreneurs. And yet, what we see and have seen for decades is a decline in the rate of business formation, in spite of the fact that entrepreneurship, in terms of its cultural power, the heroism, the lionization of entrepreneurs, is at an all-time high. And yet, young people, contrary to what popular belief is, start businesses at a lower rate than their parents did. It may be that it may be student debt, it may be risk aversion. But I'd hate to think that stories like yours, Nichole, when you were a Pizza Hut manager before you went on to found Credit Karma, and Noramay, a single mom who went on to get 3 advanced degrees with MIT before entering venture capital, that those stories couldn't be told. Do you feel like that is at risk, or do we still have that well of daring people?
Yeah, so I'll just maybe kick it off. So I think there are those stories out there. I think it takes courageous people to share their story and their journey. I think a lot of it is, you'll find people in their 30s or early 40s that have regretted not starting something. And so it often becomes easier once you've seen a couple things and you know how the process works. You're more comfortable going out and starting. I actually see a lot of youth today starting their own business. I don't think we think of them more, as you said, as small business owners instead of as entrepreneurs. And I think small business owners are entrepreneurs, and they don't need to be in software as a service to be an entrepreneur. So I think the sort of view of what is an entrepreneur has been a little bit skewed by society today.
Noramay?
Yeah, so I would add, I was incredibly lucky to have been introduced to the world of engineering when I was in high school, thinking that if I could get a job making $10 an hour, I was going to be okay, right? I was going to have an okay life. And so first of all, I was lucky to have had that catalyzing tap on the shoulder experience. And then, I jumped on the opportunity and totally changed my life. I see a lot of incredibly talented first-generation college graduates who can't go into entrepreneurship because of what I call the reality of responsibility, right? They're financially responsible for their parents. They're financially responsible for their siblings. And maybe there could be 2 or 3 generations of family members depending on them, and that was certainly the case for me. So it took a while for me to get my home situation in a position to, give me the freedom to take that leap. So I think, having that responsibility, not having the social capital or the social network that can give you $100,000 or $200,000 in friends and family money to, experiment with, can definitely be a deterrent.
Good.
I would say that if you look at why people work or why they start businesses, you can probably break it into 3 things. You can probably break it into economics, purpose, and flexibility. And although you've got this decline in business formation, you've got this other thing happening, which the freelancer numbers and the gig economy numbers are off the charts.
Yeah.
So you've got this huge rise in the freelance economy. At the same time, you've got this decline in business formation. And to some degree, you can see people leveraging technology platforms to get that same access to economics, the same access to purpose, with perhaps even more flexibility working as a freelancer than if they were to start a small 1, 2, 3 person operation. And I think that's probably a significant trade-off that's going to have implications. But I think to date, it's been a very, very positive experience for millions and millions of people who are gravitating into this freelance economy.
Good. Sachin, you painted a portrait of a lot of people who are not necessarily tech savvy being able to leverage technology because of developments in AI, and then unleashing perhaps all kinds of new companies that otherwise would not have been possible. Is that the source of the next, Horatio Alger rags to riches stories?
So I think what you're seeing is, number one, I think you're seeing this massive hybrid merging between small, medium business and what was called tech. You're seeing the solopreneur that wasn't there before because you just needed more bodies to get things done. It's now cheaper, quicker, less complicated to build software, to build technology, to engage digitally. And I think those three things coupling together with also the general realization from young people that it doesn't need to be the first thing I do out of school. It's okay to go work somewhere, because now those three things that were going to cost more, that I needed friends and family for, that sort of barrier has already been removed. So I can take my time. I think there's also a cultural view that folks prefer flexibility over economics when they come out of school. They're slightly more broad-minded in how they see the world. But I think if you stretch that out a little bit more, you'll start seeing that they're re-engaging in the broadest terms of entrepreneurship in a much higher velocity than they've done before.
Good. I want to take up another topic, too, that there's been a lot of talk about the trend, as entrepreneurship spreads in the US away from being totally concentrated in Silicon Valley, that there's a renewed emphasis on profitability as opposed to just scaling. Is that a real trend, or is that wishful thinking on the part of those people trying to start companies outside of Silicon Valley money? Oisin, could I ask you to start?
Yeah, I'd probably break the company growth into 3 parts. I'd say there's the product market fit, where you're asking yourself, does anyone care? There's the second lap of the track, where you race to some sort of scale, some sort of critical mass. And then there's the third part, which is you figure out what it looks like to actually run a sustainable business that may or may not work over the long term. And I think that's, I think the duration you spend in each of those phases really depends on access to capital. It depends on how big your market is. But I think increasingly there is a focus on strong unit economics. There is a focus on, are you delivering a great customer experience, and are you building something that is long-term sustainable that can actually pay for itself? And I think it's broadly positive.
Okay, good. Noramay, I'll give you the last word since you're the financier on our panel.
I think it really depends on the kind of venture capital firms you're associated with, right? Tell me who you hang out with, and I'll tell you who you are. Something like that my mom repeated to me over and over in high school. There are the VC firms who will say, go out and raise money now because the climate is good and it may not be next year. So they're giving that sort of false growth. Whereas there are the venture firms who will say, let's make sure that you're growing in a very capital efficient way and getting to revenue faster. And maybe you don't need to raise this really large fund next time around. So I think let's take responsibility on the venture side and know that we have a large role to play in the mindset of a lot of these companies.
Okay. All right. Please join me in thanking our panelists. It looks like 2019 will be a year to look forward to. Thank you.